Hi friends, welcome to the Wild Side. I'm Steve Hall. We celebrate our wilderness areas where we can go to just get away. But there was a time when the wilderness was not only a great place to get away, but an even better place to hide. Along the Highland Rim and the rocky backwoods near Byrdstown, an unsuspecting traveler might stumble onto a still or come face to face with a moonshiner. Or it was possible to discover a clearing with a cabin where a small boy lived, a boy who would grow up to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Walking the Buncombe Cave Trail at Cordell Hull Birthplace State Park doesn't really require any special preparation.
The hike, round trip's about a 2-mile loop. There's some pretty steep little sections, but it's not a bad hike overall.
I would say it was moderate. There were some like stepping up and stepping down that might be rough on people with bad knees, but for the most part it was fairly moderately easy.
Nobody is in a hurry. Much of this ranger-guided trip seems more like a stroll than a hike, but it's not supposed to be hard.
We love hiking and going to parks together and seeing what there is to see and spending time together in the woods. We like to backpack and camp, and it's nice to come to an interpretive hike and learn something while you're doing that as well.
Modern means makes the journey possible, even for a determined man in his 70s, still recovering from knee surgery. The path is plainly visible and clearly marked.
There's a couple of the overlooks that you can look down and see the cave from above, and then there's a series of steps that come down and actually enter the cave, and you can walk up into the cave and get up close and personal with it.
But the trek to Buncombe Cave hasn't always been this easy. There was a time when one of the easiest things to do in this rough and rocky backwoods was to get lost, and that made Buncombe Cave an appealing place to put a moonshine still.
It'd be hard to find. The government, the federal government, the regulators, or the law that would be looking for these areas, it'd be difficult to get into. It'd be rugged territory to cover. It was a great place to hide. You could get in here. The only problem is it's rough to get down here without the development that we have, the stairs, the trails. To imagine carrying the amount of materials, not only the copper to build the still, but the corn and the yeast and sugar, and then to get that out of here would have been a tremendous amount of work and effort.
All that work and effort turned to profit for Cordell Hull's father, William, known as Uncle Billy in these parts. He did get caught once.
There was a reference he was fined $50, and he made $1,000 off of selling the moonshine. So that $1,000 combined with probably what he had saved up from the farming helped him to purchase his timber business and move on. And that's how he made his fortune. He was, one reference I've seen described him as the richest man in the Upper Cumberland.
It's these kinds of stories that surface along with the swirling waters of Buncombe Cave that made this venture more intriguing to visitors.
It gives you a little bit more of a personal connection with the past. Even though you're surrounded by nature, there's more of a human element to it too.
But the natural beauty, in and of itself, still makes an impact.
It's remote. There's not a lot of people that come through here, and we can come out here and enjoy, nature, and it's pretty much undisturbed. It's not a bunch of houses. There's not a bunch of cars going by. You can't hear any vehicles from here. It's just a great place to visit.
Oh, I loved going inside the cave and then looking out. It's a magnificent cave opening and not difficult to access, and just a very beautiful view and very quiet and cool, and just feels really good and special.
It goes about a mile back that it's been mapped. There are probably other connections and sinkholes and entrances that are out there, but this is the primary entrance.
The mouth is roughly 100 feet wide and 80 feet tall. The cave is barely more than a mile from the log cabin where Cordell Hull was born. On this day, people are here for a celebration of Cordell Hull's birthday. He was just a small boy living here during the time his dad was plowing ground behind horses or mules and selling moonshine on the side.
They were sharecroppers on this property. They didn't own this property, and they lived here 7 years before they saved up enough money to buy their own place. And they were very hard workers, and they believed in education for all 5 boys that were in the family.
But it was Cordell who would rise highest, elected chairman of the County Democratic Party at age 19, a law school graduate, attorney, judge, and elected to the Tennessee legislature, all before joining the Army during the Spanish-American War. He arrived in Cuba as a captain just as the war was winding down.
Here's a man who was successful, who had no need to go and join the Army and risk his life, and yet he does, because he feels compelled by that call of volunteerism, which of course Tennessee is known for, to walk away from his civilian pursuits, join the Army, risk his life, go overseas, and lead men into battle. Thankfully, they did not have to fight a battle, but they were willing to go. Of course, when he comes back, he goes back into politics, and of course that is not hurt by a war record, because in that time period that was very important.
Hull would go on to be elected 11 times to the U.S. House of Representatives between 1907 and 1921.
At the time he lived, he was one of the most popular politicians in Tennessee, and he was very much beloved.
Hull was elected to the United States Senate in 1930, and just 3 years later began his tenure as the longest-serving Secretary of State in history under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. These were challenging times with the Great Depression and World War II, and Hull's decisions were not without question and controversy. But ultimately, he would be described by Roosevelt as the father of the United Nations and presented in 1945 with the Nobel Peace Prize.
I always found it interesting that a judge and eventual Secretary of State would start from a sort of an illicit operation here in a cave.
That is probably one of those great American success stories, because there are a lot of American heroes who have come from humble beginnings, and moonshiners and bootleggers.
It's an inspirational story for all of us. What more can you ask? The American dream is, represented by this place as well.
He is really a giant in American political history, but it's been long enough now that he is getting sort of lost to history, which is why events like this are important, to remind people, here is a man who came literally from a log cabin and humble beginnings to a man who helps found the United Nations.
Our website, wildsidetv.com, will guide you to more information about Cordell Hull and his birthplace. There are more than 1,500 books, original photographs, and other memorabilia in the Hull Library and Archives.